Gaming Geek here with a quick video. I just watched Arcane that just dropped on Netflix last night. It premiered and my son and I watched the first 3 and the next 6 episodes are going to drop the subsequent 2 Saturdays. And I'm filming right now on November 7th. So all of the series will be available on Netflix in a couple of weeks. I know I don't normally talk about shows, but this series I think is really good. That I want to present this to you guys and encourage you all to watch it because it is that good. In fact, I am foregoing my unboxing of Hero Quest that was just mailed to me because I think this show is amazing, as well as not going to talk about all of the GGGGs for this month. Like I normally share at the beginning of each video, but just wanted to get this out really quickly so that you guys can hear why I think that Arcane is the Star Wars prequels and sequels that I've always wanted, but was so disappointed by when those came out. So Arcane is sort of taking that spot of being everything that I wanted those sequels and prequels to be, but they were so disappointingly not. And I also know that comparing Arcane with Star Wars is comparing apples to oranges, but for me who grew up on the original trilogy, all media that I consume is in the framework of how it compares with especially Empire Strikes Back, which is one of the greatest movies ever made. So for those of you who don't know, Arcane is a series from Riot Games, which created a video game called League of Legends. It's a MOBA game where you play with other people. I actually played a while ago. It's been many years since I've played, but I used to play both Teemo and Jinx. And Jinx is one of the main characters that is in this series. So when I heard about them working on this many years ago, I was super excited and wanted to watch, because even the animations that they have in promoting the game and introducing characters, I think has always been super cool. And many fans have thought, man, this would be awesome if they made some kind of series or movie using League of Legends characters. And in fact, there are a lot of fan-made art and animations that have been done over the years. So I was super excited about this series when it was announced, and this is a over 6-year project, so I knew that it was going to be great. And sure enough, the graphics and the animation is absolutely top tier and is amazing. And I think actually because of the story and the world setting, that the animated style of this is better than if it were live action. Even though I stopped playing League of Legends, I continue to be a fan and watch League of Legends games and championship that coincided with the premiere yesterday that happened with Worlds. Unfortunately, my team, Damwon, lost to EDG, but it's something that my son and I watch together. We're not into watching traditional sports, but we definitely like watching esports. Fortunately for you guys though, if you don't know anything about League of Legends or the video game, that will not hamper you at all in terms of enjoying or understanding this world or this storyline that's found in Arcane, so don't worry about that. If you don't know anything about Arcane, it centers around 2 sisters, Vi and Powder, also known as Jinx, and they are struggling as poor orphans in the Undercity known as Zon, versus the upper city, which is called Piltover, where the wealthy and the privileged live. So instantly you see that there's this economic conflict and political conflict between those who live above and those who live below in the Undercity. Clearly in Star Wars, the conflict wasn't necessarily economic, but was political in the sense that a democratic republic was taken over by the Empire, a dictatorship, and the struggle was watching the rebellion rebelling against the Empire. And this is where Arcane is different from Star Wars. It's not an epic space opera spanning galaxies. Rather, it is focused in on just one city in a pretty epic world that League of Legends is found in. But I sort of prefer a little bit of a smaller and more micro context for the storyline. It's what I really enjoyed about Rogue One, which is the best post-original Star Wars trilogy Star Wars movie, because it was a little bit more centered and a little bit more focused on a smaller context and with fewer characters. And that way, I think Arcane, by limiting some of the scope of the world, makes it a little bit tighter with storytelling and with character development. And considering the popularity of a lot of shows right now that are highlighting some of the economic differences and the limits of capitalism, such as Squid Games, I think the context and the setting of conflict between those who have and those who have not is especially prescient for our times. Also, Arcane doesn't have the Force, but instead, the world of League of Legends has magic in it. And the interesting thing about the League of Legends world is that people are inherently either born with magical abilities, which are few and rare, or you're just a normal person and you don't have any magical talent or ability. But what's interesting, and this is within the context of the storyline, is that they're exploring or trying to figure out ways to make magic accessible to everyone, and this is called hex tech. And so we're just beginning to see some of that developing, where science is being used to harness the power of magic and democratizing that so that everyone might be able to have access. Of course, you have to be rich or wealthy to access that power, but at least it's making it accessible to sort of normal people. In Star Wars, that's not the case. You either have Force ability and Force power, or are a Jedi, or you're not, but everyone is sort of intertwined with the Force, this sort of force, this benevolent, or not always benevolent, but something that intertwines all of us together, sort of an Eastern religious thought. But in Arcane, instead, the alternative is that there is magic. And what's interesting is that, unlike in Star Wars, the main characters, at least so far, do not have magical abilities. And because I know the lore a little bit of the characters, I think they aren't going to get magical. There aren't hidden magical powers. So most of the characters, at least that we see so far, do not have access to inherent magical powers. And that's different from Star Wars. Obviously, Jedi and the Force is a major component and part of that storyline. But it is interesting because the main characters come from the Undercity that they are relatively powerless in the sense of not having access to magic that would make them very distinct and would give them an upper hand. Ultimately, I think the Star Wars prequels and the sequels to a lesser extent failed because there wasn't the similar emotional attachment and investment into the characters that was found in the original trilogy of Star Wars. Whereas with the original, you were really invested in Han Solo and Chewbacca and Princess Leia, sort of this ensemble cast. All of these characters had chemistry with each other. You were rooting for them. You really were surprised, obviously, in terms of how their relationships were working out, even though the minor sexual tension between Luke and what ended up being his sister, and Han Solo, even I'm glad that was minor and wasn't a major part of the storyline, but even that was funny and interesting, and it just made you that much invested in those characters. And I feel like the primary failure for especially the prequels is that there was no sympathy, no emotional connection. You weren't rooting necessarily for Anakin at any single point. And in fact, Anakin was super annoying to me. And the banter between him and Obi-Wan, it felt like watching an old married couple that had a bad marriage bicker and fight all the time. I mean, it was super, super annoying. And it didn't help that the writing for the interaction and the dialogue, especially between Padme and Anakin, was just horrible. And even the talented Natalie Portman couldn't pull off those lines and make it believable. So there was just so much about that series that I think the major failure was there wasn't really an emotional connection with Anakin, nor was there with any of the bad guys, right? In the way that Darth Vader was someone who ended up becoming a complex character and someone that you were somewhat conflicted about. In the prequels, there was no such character because Palpatine was just pure evil, and it didn't help that Darth Maul got sliced in half in the very first movie. So there wasn't that persistent development of character that you were really emotionally invested in. As well, with the sequels, I didn't similarly hate Rey like I did Anakin, but I never really got emotionally invested in her as a character either. And even though there was some complexity in terms of relationship between Rey and Kylo Ren, that was a case where you just had too many writers, you had too many different directors, all in the same mix, that there wasn't a consistent storyline being driven through that trilogy. So that just suffered under the weight of its own expectations and overproduction, so that the storyline really was disjointed and didn't make a lot of sense. Whereas with Arcane, it is basically a storyline that isn't hampered by, big company executives putting their will on what they think we like, but instead this is obviously a storyline that is complex and is a project that Riot themselves took on, and it's clear that they love the characters, and because of that, the interactions that they're having with each other, they're instantly likable from the outset, from the opening scene. I am invested in particularly Vi and Powder as sisters, as we find out very early on that they're orphaned, and Vi trying to protect Powder, and the relationship that they have with Vander, and even the side characters, you just instantly like, and you're rooting for them, and you feel sympathy and empathy. So all of the things that I felt for the original Star Wars trilogy, those are the same feelings that I have, where they're believable characters, they're likable, I want to find out more about them. So that is exactly the kind of thing that was found in the original trilogy of Star Wars that was absent from both the sequels and the prequels. Also, the character development is much, much more interesting because Riot isn't sort of beating you over the head with a message of here are the bad guys, here are the good guys. They are approaching some of the complexity for classism as well as politics from the very outset. There is nuance both in characters in Piltover as well as in Zahn, where you don't have clear bad guys or clear good guys in either, although obviously your sympathies are running for the people that are being downtrodden in the Undercity and being exploited by Piltover. But there is enough nuance and complexity, and similar to Darth Vader being a complex bad guy character, that is the same with Arcane as well. In the beginning, you think, oh, this is like a Palpatine character that is just pure evil. But you're understanding a little bit more as the story goes along. An understanding of backstory. It reminds me of Naruto, where it goes into the backstory of the bad guys, and you realize and you sympathize for them because you understand where they're coming from. And it does somewhat have that feel of who would you rather prefer in terms of societal change that needs to happen in justice, social justice. Are you going to do the Martin Luther King approach, or are you going to do the Malcolm X approach? So it isn't this clear, Riot isn't making this sort of clear, hey, this is what it should be. But it's all a subcontext for character development. The focus isn't necessarily on sort of the societal issues that are going on. Rather, that's the backdrop in which we understand and sympathize with the characters that are having conflict. So that to me is perfect storytelling. That is what really makes a movie or a storyline really, really interesting. And I love how Riot isn't beating us over the head with some kind of message or a moral story or value, but instead is presenting what feels very real and relevant to us in society today, but at the same time recognizing that that's just the backdrop in which the characters can be developed. And you just get that much more invested, especially since we know that both Vi and Jinx are going to have conflict because of where they're coming from. So this is a great setup, because one of the things that I've always wanted in especially a Western-made animation is complexity and character development. Some things that you find a little bit more in terms of Japanese animation regarding complex character development, I see actually in Arcane. And what I really wished would have happened in the Star Wars sequels and the prequels as well was an investment into the characters, into the storyline. And it feels like that Riot has, at least in the first three, really set the pace and set the bar for how great this series is going to be. So go watch it right now if you haven't already. This is my endorsement, Gaming Geek. I know that we normally just do focus on games and hobbying, but this is so good that I just want to say, for any other nerds out there, if you are especially disappointed by the Star Wars sequels or prequels, this is the show that we've wanted. Yes, it's not sci-fi. It's sort of a steampunk alternative universe world. But for me, all of the things that I wanted for the sequels and prequels, it is here. It is that good. And because the first three have been this good, I feel like I can say with relative confidence that the next six are going to be super good as well. And so obviously the first three is the prequels of Star Wars, as it's setting up the relationship and establishing the relationship and investment in primarily Vi and in Jinx. So the rest of the series is going to be, episodes 4 to 6, and then the conclusion coming out later this month with what I wanted in the sequel trilogy as well. So go ahead and after you watch, especially, make comments below. Did you like the series as much as I did and am excited about the rest of the series coming out? Do you think that it's going to be a big success, and hopefully there will be more complex storylines found in animation? I mean, I'm so excited about this. Even before the series dropped, I did order the new Jinx outfit that's found in this series so that my daughter can cosplay. So obviously, I'm really excited about this. So tell me what you think. Please like and subscribe. We'll get back into gaming. I promise I'll do an unboxing and how to paint tutorial for Hero Quest. Otherwise, happy watching, happy gaming. We'll see you next time.